Thank you, Chairman Corker, Ranking Member Cardin, and thank you for this important hearing on an intolerable situation that is a requirement in statute that you, Mr. Nims, and many other dedicated professionals do your absolute best to execute on. I'm grateful for your service and for the fact that we as a generous nation continue to try and meet the unbelievable challenge of 20 million people starving or at risk of starving across just 4 countries, and millions more, you said about 800 million globally, going to bed hungry every night. The American people are generous. We have the most productive farms in the world. And so for decades, we have had a program that gives of our abundance to those who are in need around the world, but we do so in a strikingly inefficient way. I was proud to have a chance to work with my good friend Senator Isaacson and the chair and ranking and many others on the Global Food Security Act, which permanently authorized the Emergency Food Security Program, an important step in providing flexibility for delivering emergency food aid. And as Senator Cardin reminded all of us, there will always be a role for U.S. commodities in response to crises, but we can and should work together to find ways in advance of this coming Farm Bill to remove some of these harmful restrictions and requirements that I think are so inefficient. Earlier this year, Senator Corker and I visited the Bidi camp in northern Uganda. I was grateful for your joining us on that trip, and both there and in South Sudan, I had a chance to visit sites where people depend on food aid for their existence. And later in August, I traveled to northeast Nigeria, where millions have been internally displaced, mostly by Boko Haram. I was struck by an innovative program that, this is an example from Save the Children, but I suspect is well known to you. When we talk about a cash assistance program, we're not talking about sending out envelopes full of cash. We're talking about this. This is a card from a real specific individual in an IDP camp that allows her to go out and buy locally food that is appropriate for her and her children, and that changes the relationship between this refugee camp and the community around it. It provides for stability in the local markets. It provides for a better relationship between the refugee community and the community that is hosting them, and it gives more control for individuals for how they feed their children. And it frankly is much more traceable, transparent, and efficient. So I'd like to ask you a little bit more, if I could, about these so-called cash or voucher assistance programs, because I think they are dramatically more efficient than the average person might realize. When I first heard about changing from sending shiploads of American grain to sending cash, I thought, well, that's not a very good idea. It turns out that's not at all what we're doing. We're mostly doing it through very sophisticated means, whether through cell phones or individual EBT cards or with retinal scans, so that we actually have a very good idea who's getting what money to what purpose. Could you first speak to how USAID's experience with local and regional procurement has worked out so far, and what are the benefits and the difficulties to some of these innovative, I need a better word than cash, some of these innovative direct transfer food programs, and how they help you respond to these food crises?
Thank you for that question, and thank you for, again, inviting me on that trip. What we are now calling these programs is market-based assistance, which means that our teams on the ground work very hard to understand the market conditions. And to be clear, there are some places in the world where there are no market and where there are crises exist, and where in-kind food assistance can still play a role. On the local procurement side, we work very hard with our partners to identify those areas, those markets that exist, whether inside a country or in a region in different markets of Africa, where we can buy the needed commodity that it does not exist in a place where we need to go in a different location, have our partners the ability to buy this, adhering to the same sort of rules and governance of procurement that we would use in the United States to ensure that we get the right quality of food and a good quality of food. By doing that, the time saved is huge because the ocean leg is not there, combined with the market impacts, just as you said, in the community of where we're working. what we have developed over the years is just to ensure that we are not having a negative impact, that we are increasing prices, or that we're buying the wrong commodity, or that we are somehow contributing to an existing crisis that might be there. That takes really a lot of expertise of our partners, like the Catholic Relief Services as well as the World Food Program, to ensure that's happening. From the local procurement, it has saved us both time and money and become more effective as an agency in addressing these concerns. On the other programs, the voucher programs that you admit, or the programs that allow a family member or a family at large to go to a local market or a grocery store, has developed a whole new industry, or helped to develop the industry in these retinal scans or in these cards or in this mobile money, to ensure that the person targeted, the person that is supposed to receive the aid, does receive that. And we have put in place methods to ensure that those are the right people that are receiving the assistance. And as you said, they afford us the ability to know what the group of people are buying, to ensure that when we give money that we are having a nutritional or a food security impact, and that they aren't using these funds and prohibited it in most cases, in using these funds for other commodities that don't have a food security impact. So that we always want to ensure that we are targeting those most food insecure and that we are having impact.
Could I ask one more question, Mr. Sure. The chairman and others, the ranking, we've spoken about the damage, the danger of monetization. I understand the benefit to the NGOs, but the inefficiency is just stunning. What are the negative impacts on the ground in terms of instability in local markets and resiliency of the practice of monetization? Shipping U.S. commodities to remote parts of the world so they can be resold there.
At a 75 cent on the dollar loss.
I want to actually take this opportunity to correct that number. It was a 25 cent loss on the dollar. I got my numbers backwards, so I want to enter in the record that it's a 25 cent loss on the dollar. Thank you for that question as well. Monetization has been around for a long time, and there are rules that govern how we do monetization. Primarily, it's the Bellman determination, which ensures when we go into a country that we do look at the global market or the universal market in that country to ensure that the tonnage that we bring in has a very small to no impact on the market. And we take that very seriously with our colleagues at the Department of Agriculture, and we have done that for quite some time. So to answer your question, very minimal detrimental impact on the market of a given country is what we strive to do, because that's what we have been doing. For USAID and for my Office for Food for Peace, the biggest detriment is that we lose 25 cents on the dollar. And it does require that our partners who sell this food have to develop ways to be able to sell this food. NGOs traditionally are not commodity brokers, and it takes a specialized skill to do this effectively. And that takes a lot of time and effort that could be better spent on running programs as opposed to being commodity brokers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nims. I think we have a shared question about how we sustain U.S. food assistance while working together to make it more efficient, given the scale and scope of the humanitarian need around the world. Thank you for the very hard work you and your folks do to meet this massive humanitarian need.
Senator Isaacson.